Hey, it's Lindsay, and I wanted to make this video. It was very inspired by the fact that I'm reading Power of Now for probably the fifth time. And this is about my experience with therapy and what's been missing, and how the Power of Now has really been like introducing this concept, not necessarily introducing, but like going into detail on this concept that I think it is really missing from a lot of like mainstream therapy, which is very CBT based. I've done a lot of alternative therapies in addition to the CBT type of stuff. And that was only after I found doing a lot of CBT that something wasn't quite like working. And what I have found is that there is a missing piece where, like, maybe for not for all people, but for a certain portion of people, this is why we start to look into alternative therapies and somatic work. There is something missing as far as connecting to the body and the feeling sensations without intellectualizing it. And that is missing from most therapy. If you go to any kind of like therapist through your insurance company, it's going to be CBT based, maybe some DBT, but it really doesn't get a whole lot into the feelings. And the Power of Now, when he talks about going into the pain body, this is exactly the work that you do when you do somatic therapies, like somatic experiencing. I've found that like you can kind of delve into it when you do like tapping EFT, which is like you are releasing a lot of, like, you'll go through the different tapping points in the meridians, and it will bring up some feeling emotions, and the idea is that you're kind of letting that go. But I do feel like something more direct is also really helpful, because for me, and I know I'm not the only one out there, there's a little bit of a disconnection to our feelings. So we've been taught, usually through childhood for whatever reason, to kind of stuff down our feelings because it's not convenient. And it wasn't directly taught, but it was kind of like indirectly understood by children, maybe misunderstood, that it wasn't to our benefit to fully feel our feelings, and to kind of like we subconsciously push it away and like suppress it, repress it. And over time we just kind of like become out of touch with our feelings, and we are only really consciously aware of our thoughts. And so I also think that that is one reason why the Power of Now is sometimes difficult to understand in the beginning. Like I said, I've read Power of Now like 5 times. So in the beginning, I think that one of the reasons why it's so hard to, like, you can understand it on an intellectual level, but then putting it into practice is difficult, because we are trained as a society to kind of push our emotions aside and also be very identified with our thoughts. So all of this is very confusing. It's not an ideal way to live, and it puts us very out of touch with like how to use our emotional guidance system. And so when it comes to like therapy and making use of this idea of like kind of processing the emotions from the pain body, the key is to feel these feelings without thinking about them. And because when you're thinking about them, you're like taking the emotions, which are just kind of like another form of your thoughts. I can't remember the exact terminology that Eckhart Tolle used, but it's like a different form, just a different vibrational energy of your thought energy is your emotions. But it's like more inaccessible. So you're just kind of like in, in therapy, if you're not really taught to feel your feelings without making stories about them, then you're not really able to process the feelings itself. You're just processing the thoughts. And this is the whole problem with like, sometimes therapy doesn't work all the way. It's because, you've done a lot of thought processing, but not a lot of like actual feeling processing. Sometimes for people, they get benefit from doing the thought processing. It goes backwards, and this is called a top-down approach. And therapists are starting to realize that there's like differences between a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach. A bottom-up approach is addressing the feelings themselves and then going to process the thoughts later. But my experience is that even the therapists, these are the ones who are like typically cheapest on your insurance plan. They directly take insurance. They might say that they understand the bottom-up approach, but in my experience, that's not the case. I've really only met therapists who work outside of the insurance system who understand how to do this properly. And that's unfortunate, but that's just the truth. And, sometimes these therapists will like give you a super bill and you can submit indirectly to your insurance company, but they don't bill themselves. But typically it's more expensive. It's a lot more expensive to access these kinds of therapists. So it is difficult, but there are books like The Power of Now. He does talk about how to like just watch and observe your feelings without thinking about them, without turning them into stories. This is difficult to do though. If you don't have, it's impossible to do if you don't have a certain level of like presence consciousness, which is what the whole book is about. But at a certain level, like I know for me, many years I wasn't able to develop any kind of presence. Like it was very, very difficult. I had to do a lot of meditation to get myself to a point where I started recognizing that I was identifying with my thoughts and my feelings. And that gave me a little bit of space. So there's also somatic experiencing. So somatic experiencing is very similar, where you're basically tuning into your felt sense of like what's happening, the sensations in your body, without going into the stories, and processing just as feeling. And there's some books out there. Anything written by Peter Levine can be helpful, and there are a lot of like practitioners as well. Like I know like you can download some mini courses on somatic experiencing as well. So there are resources out there, but my point of this video is just to say that there is a missing piece in therapy, and if you're not getting the benefit that you would have expected after all of the energy and time and money that you put into therapy, and you still feel like something's wrong, and you're still like emotional and like feeling like something is still unprocessed, this is another approach. I did want to mention DBT is another thing that if you go to a regular therapist, they're going to suggest CBT. If you're still having problems processing your emotions, they're going to move you over to DBT. It is a little bit more helpful, but I do still feel like it's not fully comprehensive in my opinion. So it is a good second step to go through first. Yeah, a more somatic approach. And as you build more presence and more meditative awareness, you can move into like a power of now approach of just observing the feeling, just observing the pain body. Basically, awareness allows it to dissolve because you're no longer identified with it. So that's all for now, and wish you good luck with your therapy. And let me know if you have any questions, comments, and very interested. Okay, take care.